Chimeir is a distant planet. It is defined by waves of life brought from Earth and set free to evolve independently in this new context. The indigenous life of the planet, swarms of microbes called magic by the people who live there, are what harvest Earth organisms and make copies on Chimeir. As the asteroid which concluded the Mesozoic never struck Chimeir, dinosaurs remain the dominant terrestrial megafauna.
There are many formidable monsters in the Seridic wetlands. Elephant-sized hippos with tusks nearly a meter long, horned dinosaurs covered in armor, 4 species of Megaraptoran, the largest of which is the biggest theropod ever to live on Earth or Chimeir, seal-like hyenodonts, saber-toothed panthers, numerous small novosaurs, countless species of large dangerous fish like the great pouncer, and around a dozen species of crocodilian. Even a giant frog so large it can eat a human. These natural beasts dwell along the great diversity of wild demons, homunculi, and even an alleged necromancer hiding deep within the marshes. All these inspire terror and reverence in the local peoples. However, perhaps the most feared entity in all the Seridic wetlands is the Jugashen. Jugashen are the largest of the spirit drakes, a clade of dubious origin. Traditionally thought to be either thescelosaurs or perhaps elasmarians, they may instead belong to the cervosaurians, a group of basal ornithopods or ornithischians that might itself belong within or sister to Elasmaria. When dealing with the great diversity of very basal ornithischians in Chimeir, specific characters that can be confidently identified as clade markers, and not cases of similar ancestry or convergence, can be hard to come by. A 4th ancestry of small bird-hipped dinosaurs may also be the origin, entirely distinct from the clades mentioned above. Their fossils show up in the known world around 10 million years ago, though. Either earlier fossils may be present in Picardia and Kadan, suggesting a likely southern origin. However, it may instead be that they rapidly evolved in the aftermath of the dynastic extinction and just haven't shown up yet in earlier formations. Many lineages of Chimeran thescelosaur and basal ornithopod grew large when the opportunity presented itself, so yet another independent evolution of gigantism would hardly be unprecedented on Earth or Chimeir. A lot of scholars still place them as not only thescelosaurs, but within the archetyposaurs. If their fossil record origin in Picardio-Caline holds out, and if this is indeed the region from which this group radiated in the aftermath of the dynastic extinction, it should also be said that a southern origin does not necessarily prohibit them being thescelosaurs. These are semi-aquatic animals, after all, and quite capable of swimming between islands down to Picardia and the Caline Islands from Arvel or Nicar. Needless to say, their placement is uncertain and a matter of continued scholarly debate. The Jugashen itself is endemic to the Seridic wetlands, though they have very similar related animals in the swamps of Nicar to the west, and there are other spirit drakes in Arvel, Picardia, and the southern islands. A more aquatic specialized cousin, the Taguru, is abundant throughout the inland sea and its thousands of scattered islands. Jugashen share a habitat with the Jiao, a much smaller relative. Jugashen are massive animals. Not only are they barrel-chested and very muscular with thick bones, these bones are enormous and very dense. Females regularly reach 10 meters long and 5 tons, while males are known to reach 9 to 11 tons and 13 meters in length. With this great bulk and density, they are better built to walk along the bottom of rivers than properly swim like their more buoyant marine cousins. This helps keep them submerged while they forage. Males are solitary. Females sometimes live in loose groups of 3 to 5 individuals, usually related, though it's not uncommon for them to be solitary as well. They lay enormous eggs, largest of any animal in the known world. They provide closer and longer care for their young than thescelosaurs, often until the next year's clutch is laid, though they will remain near their mother for several years. It takes females 5 years to reach maturity, as much as 7 for males. Unlike many dinosaurs, though typical of Elusmerians, they reach skeletal and sexual maturity around the same time, meaning they become adults and don't grow much after. Compared to thescelosaurs, they show a great deal of intelligence, one of the many reasons a lot of scholars are inclined to move them out of this clade. Both sexes possess a mane of feathers, though it is fairly short. They oil this structure with glands at the base of the tail to keep from hindering movement too much in the water. Males who achieve a dominant position in the area will have this mane grow from the length of a human hand to up to 2 meters long. A cumbersome display structure that, no matter how well oiled, easily becomes heavily waterlogged. Even so, this is a clear signal of virility which subordinate males avoid and females are drawn to. Jugashen are obligate omnivores, meaning they need both meat and plants in their diet. They have wide-set eyes with a boxy back of the skull and a narrow snout. The diet varies by individual, but most are primarily fed by the Seridic hyacinth, a plant which diverged from its Terran ancestor around 6 million years ago, suggesting this as a harvest of origin. They float on the surface of slow and still water. These nutritious plants are packed with protein and are extremely vigorous and prolific, with a large mat doubling in size in a matter of a week or two. Many herbivores are dedicated to their consumption, which helps reduce the negative impacts these plants can have on an ecosystem, such as choking out plankton and killing fish. Behemoth hippos, which are not as grass-specialized as their common kin, also feed on hyacinth, as do the horned dinosaur Ceratopotamus. Common hippos and water buffalo also sometimes supplement their grazing diet with the hyacinth. The casctar, a possibly related thescelosaur, is often a high browser but will go out of its way to bulk feed on hyacinth whenever possible. Together, these big herbivores all contribute to keeping this highly aggressive plant in check. However, chomping down on a quarter ton of hyacinth every day isn't what makes them so feared. In addition to packing in a lot of vegetation, spirit drakes do require some meat for a healthy diet. In most cases, fish is the preference. They have binocular vision, but they aren't especially fast or agile, so small fish are very difficult to come by. However, the Seridic wetlands aren't just home to cichlid and bicuda. Plenty of enormous fish like the crocodile gar, Seridic arapaima, numerous catfish, lungfish, and squamantarchs have specimens perfect for the size. Troctoplosis is a genus of large, fast-growing perch-like fish thought to derive from Cretaceous fish. The Crescent Sea has numerous species, 3 of which spawn in the Seridic wetlands. When these large fish come upstream, they can become all the Jugashen eats for weeks at a time. In addition to fish, Jugashen will also take small game. They have a degree of flexibility in their jaws that is limited by a hard bill. Within this scope, they rarely take a game they can't swallow whole, as despite a sharp beak, they're poorly equipped to butcher game into more manageable pieces. Unfortunately for people who live in the same area as this enormous animal, small game includes humans, especially to fully grown males. Zentaur might raid a village to seek out livestock, yet Jugashen are much more interested in the villagers themselves. This is not a universal trait of all Jugashen, with focused hunting being restricted to a few particularly skilled and experienced older males. Jugashen are quiet stalkers, and it is not unheard of for them to sneak into a settlement, kill and collect a few people in their jaws and arms, and depart undetected. Only when people are missing and great webbed footprints are discovered in the morning is the attack known. There are many reasons for the walls and elevated huts of the Seridic peoples, but the Jugashen is certainly a frequent culprit. The Jiao is a similar animal also found in the Seridic wetlands. They show much less size dimorphism than the Jugashen, with females and subordinate males both being around 4 to 5 meters long, and dominant males sometimes reaching 6. They tend to live in larger groups, with as many as a dozen related females living together, and males in bachelor herds of a few subordinates and one dominant individual. Dominant males also grow a long mane, though it is quite difficult to tell if females and subordinate males apart. This meant that for a long time it was assumed that the social structure was more like horses, where a single male had a harem of females, though the herds are instead sex-segregated. Species of Jiao are found beyond the Seridic wetlands, both in Nikar and Arvel, and where they do intersect with the Jugashen, they tend to be smaller and more solitary. In populations that can approach the size of a small adult Jugashen, which is where a lot of taxonomic confusion has come from. The most derived and abundant species of spirit drake is the Taguru. Their diet is primarily seagrass. While grazing, they can often swim on their side, letting their long bill and sharp teeth reap swaths from the sea floor, chopping through it like scissors. Despite this being their staple, Taguru will sometimes hunt fish and crustaceans. They also intake plenty of crustaceans accidentally through grazing. Juveniles tend to eat a lot more crustaceans and fish, graduating to primarily seagrass once they are around a year old. While other spirit drakes can swim but usually just sink and walk along the substrate to forage, the Taguru is much more buoyant and a very proficient swimmer. With short back legs to reduce drag as they kick to power an incredibly widely muscled tail, they can attain short bursts of speed that helps them evade most predators in the inland sea. Being better swimmers than marine sloths and desmostilians, Taguru tend to graze in slightly deeper waters that enable them to avoid competition with the more dominant seagrass grazers. Their superior size and herd, coupled with weaponry rivaling that of marine sloths, Taguru are able to hold their own in conflicts for shore space. As they must still nest on land, they do have surprising proficiency with climbing, perhaps to avoid laying nests near crowds of seals, desmostilians, walrus, and sloths. Males are larger and less nimble, but they can still climb up several meters of rock to make a nest that females will hopefully choose and lay with. They are also a more social species, with small clans of single-sex groups congregating in loose, mixed-sex herds of several hundred. Perhaps as a consequence of being so social, they are also much more violent with each other than any other spirit drake, with both sexes readily wrestling and lacerating each other with long claws in territory disputes. Males fight each other to defend prime nest sites, and females drawn to him will fight one another for his attention. After all, most islands in the Trekayam are small and cannot support many nests, so dominant males with the best sites can be quite competitive for the females. The male, at least, will usually fast during the 3-month incubation, and females often guard quite regularly through A dominant male will often have numerous mates, though he will usually fast during the 3-month incubation, while the females will periodically leave to feed. Subordinate members of both sexes are more likely to lay in lower terrain closer to shore, and are less diligent defenders. They lose more eggs. Once the young hatch and parents offer protection, but not nearly as much care as the Jugashen. They must fend for themselves shortly after hatching. Instead of the long mane of their cousins, males and females of both sexes instead have a dense coat of short feathers on their necks and torsos that they diligently oil while on land. There are similar animals reported in other Kaline islands. The Igetsumak of the southern cousin and likely ancestor of the Taguru, with a much denser coat of feathers, and feed on the kelp forests instead of seagrass. Kadan and Kalren both have Jiao-like species with much more substantial feather coloring. The Kadaneth species is considered extinct, though the Kalren aluka is still quite abundant. Along with the small Hugagore species and the Kalren tuga, the aluka is Kalren's largest herbivore. These live in small groups and are by all accounts quite peaceful animals. There's minimal sexual dimorphism, and males do not grow manes. Aside from the occasional Titan crow, no predator regularly targets these one-ton animals, though young are at risk from the likes of the Kalren panther. Compared to the northern Jiao, Jugashen, and Taguru, the species in the southern islands show greater morphological distinction. The last and least understood is the Kodran Koku of the Picardian Highlands. These were long thought to be a species of Jugashen, but the mane in their males and size being only slightly smaller is likely a case of convergence. They are thought to be genetically much closer to the Igetsumek. Compared to the tall Jugashen, the Kodran Koku is a low-slung animal. They are said to be the most herbivorous member of the clade, with floating mats of horsetails being their staple. As moose, caprotrox, giant sloth, and other wetland mammal herbivores avoid horsetail for the highly abrasive silica being horrible for their teeth, and Jurazhent faring poorly in the water, this means an abundant and highly nutritious food source is almost exclusively the purview of the Kodran Koku. Reports of them feeding on the occasional fish or small mammals are no doubt cases of nutrient deficiency or drought. Weochituka are said to hunt them on occasion, but for the most part, adults at 6 to 8 tons are considered immune to predation, especially as Picardy's apex predator, the Oritaku, is extremely buoyant and only follows prey into the water out of desperation. The greater diversity of spirit drakes in the south compared to the north, even if their most famous members are in the inland sea and Seridic wetlands, does lend support to the interpretation that these have an origin in the Picardio-Kaline continent. Potential fossils of similar animals and Rooster Cress's own fossil record further support this. If true, then they are quite likely Alismarians or a similar animal, not Thescelosaurs. A growing consensus is that these animals likely originated in the south as small animals, then radiated north in the aftermath of the dynastic extinction, likely spreading in 2 radiations. First, the ancestor of the Jiao and Jugashen, when followed by the more aquatic Taguru perhaps as recently as 1.5 million years ago, as the inland sea underwent a faunal turnover. This theory may be favored, but there are some who still hold to the older Thescelosaur classification and a mainland origin, likely from Nikar. If the southern origin holds true, that would make the spirit drakes among the few examples of an island fauna that took to and thrived in a more competitive mainland context. Genetic studies would of course help illuminate this confusion, but for now, this resolution is not a high priority of the assembly, and genetic testing requires technology that Chimeirans are not readily accepting of in high quantity. Regardless of their origins, These are feared and formidable animals, and a throwback to a time when dinosaurs were often depicted as monsters of the wetlands. Cheers to Ian for sponsoring this episode. The episodes of November are focused on animals we will meet in this year's Megaraptoran saga, the Fable of Faigemi. As with the saga of Tanir and Baru, the Fable of Faigemi will take place in a chapter every Tuesday. This story will follow a young Bakar as she comes of age in the Seridic wetlands. Thanks again to Ian, to my Patreon supporters, and thank you so much for watching. Cheers, folks!